Okay, it's 4:16 on December 4th, 2014. And so yeah, I'm back with my other computer trying to get this to work, and I uninstalled a few programs that I think hopefully will help, whatever, so see what happens. Um, and again, I don't know how long I'll go, I'll go as long as I can. Um, So one thing I just realized recently, like, how I try to condition myself to stay in touch with happiness. I'm like hot, but that's all right. Um, is that I basically say to myself, I feel completely happy, or listen to a tape saying that. I mean, it's great. Some people might think it's kind of mechanistic and all, but for God's sake, I mean, like, so many people are on, like, antidepressants to be happy, and, like, there's so many kind of like ways that we use to try to be happy that don't work, or just like are so expensive or time consuming, and also like this may be mechanism. It may seem unnatural, but we're living in a very unnatural world. I think that, like, basically, you know we human beings could and should be much happier, but because of the, like, well, in this, in industrialized countries, because of the complexity of our civilization and all the things that we demand of ourselves in our market economy that always has us in a state of want. There's a lot of artificial, equally mechanistic and unnatural, impediments to our happiness. So, like, if we want to counter that either through a chemical that enhances happiness, or, like, my technique of just, like, saying to myself, I feel completely happy, or um, listening to an MP3 file of myself saying that, then I think it's fine. Yeah. But what I'm doing though with that is, like, what's interesting, I meditate a lot, and one of the things I think that's supposed to come about from meditation is you kind of like lose your sense of self in a way, lose your ego. And I mean, like, it's not that I really feel that per se, but I'm noticing, like, years ago when I tried this technique, and, like, maybe even as recently as 7 or 8 months ago, whatever, I felt the need to say the entire phrase, or think the entire phrase, I feel completely happy, in order to kind of like feel the effect of it, whatever. But now, recently, over the last couple of days, I've been thinking that, like, that's a long phrase. I've been kind of like, and I got to actually make another MP3 file because I don't have one of this. Um, Rather than saying the entire phrase, I feel completely happy, just say happiness, just the word happiness. Because, like, what I've been finding is that when I just say that to myself, and it's like a mantra for people who meditate, it's just like, it's just a focus like any other kind of focus. When I do that, it works. It seems to work equally well, and it might actually work better because, thinking about it now, the I statement kind of like emphasizes or reinforces this I-ness, and when you have an I-ness, you have a thou-ness, or us and them, or me and everything else, whatever. Whereas when I just say the word happiness, it doesn't include that I-ness component that I think tends to separate one from the rest of reality. I'm not, I'm not sure I feel that all that much. It kind of makes sense that that would be the case, but because I just started, with the happiness thing recently. I went into Manhattan last night, did a show, didn't get back here until like 3 o'clock in the morning, and but the show went well. I don't know. Um, so so yeah, I mean, like, I'm focusing on happiness, well, because in a certain sense, because that's what there is. I guess, like, when you get to be a certain age or go through a certain amount of experience. I just got a haircut. The woman who does, I think, a decent job was there. So, I mean, actually, I would have wanted the size to be shorter, but whatever. Um, but So what was I saying? Um, oh yeah, so like, I'm focusing on happiness. You get to be a certain age, go through, whatever experiences, and you realize the vanity of it all, or the superficiality of it all, or the inconsequentiality of it all, or the futility of it all. In other words, like, we're conditioned from a very early age, yeah, want this, go after it, get it, and then you'll be happy, and then go after something else and all. And like, people spend their lives doing this. And, I'm not going to say it doesn't work. It works, pretty well for a lot of people. It doesn't work nearly well enough for most people. But, talking about artificiality, it seems kind of like an artificial existence. It seems like, all the tasks that we consume our hours with aren't really so very well connected with who we are as a species. And again, this is all, theoretical. I'm just speculating, but the thought that comes to me is that for thousands of years, I don't know, for millennia, basically there wasn't much to do. You just make sure you have enough to eat. You might want to make some clothing, or do whatever you do. Make a hut or improve the hut or whatever. But life was very, very, very simple. Even in terms of nobody read. Think about it like before reading, before writing, even before language. Think of it that way. Before there was any language. Basically life was experiential. You experience life. There was some rudimentary communication with others. That was maybe probably very gestural. But our minds were not consumed with the stuff that they're consumed with today. So like, I guess when Buddhists meditate, that's one of the things they try to do. They try to clear their mind of all this stuff. But like, all right, in terms of like using happiness as a mantra, sure, it might have that effect, and it might also kind of like be conceptual. And like when I say happiness to myself, or I'm listening it, again, I got to make a new MP3 file, but like when I consider the concept of happiness, it gets me in touch with the experience. It kind of like reminds me of it, and evokes it. But it nonetheless is conceptual. It's tied to this word happiness. But I think it's a lot more simple, a lot more essential, than the kind of like than this constant stream of thoughts that ordinarily go through our minds, about whatever. I don't know. Okay. So yeah, I hope this this computer will work now in this way. I'm wondering, like, no, never mind. Yeah, I hope this works, because I'd rather like record these things from this computer than from the other one. The other one's got like moving so slowly. I don't know what's wrong with it. I gotta like do another virus scan, whatever. But all right, I just don't have much to say. Again, I got home last night from Manhattan. We did a live show at 11. Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and I didn't get home till 3, and then I didn't get to sleep till it's got to have been 6 actually. Maybe even later. Because then I went on the computer for a while. Let's say from 3 to 4:30, and so I finally got some things done today. I just had to like run an errand to get my hair cut, and just I did some computer stuff earlier. I'm running a system, I forget what it. Anyway, but So let's see. So happiness. All right. So like, here's the thing. So like, I'm kind of like, and this is good. This is good to explore exactly what's going on. So I'm kind of like trying to think of what to talk about. And, what's going through my mind is like, well, I want it to be somewhat interesting. And, and, I'm not coming up with anything, which is kind of good, because if I'm not coming up with anything, then that means I should just focus on my happiness. Um, because that's, that again, like, this video journal was you know originally supposed to be about like my thoughts, my life and stuff, but I don't see much point to that, because um, in other words, like, let's say I were to understand myself, let's say a lot better, or understand the world a lot better, or whatever. I mean, the only outcome of that is like, that would create happiness, more happiness, whatever, or get me more in touch with it, whatever. So, instead of all this like self-knowledge, just simplifying it, to just have it be knowledge about this thing called happiness. And let's go back to it, because like, I could probably try to define happiness 1,000 times and still, be really not so very close to the importance of it to our lives, to the primacy of it, in our existence. That is, it is all there is, and it's so amazing to consider that. It's so amazing that, like, all right, so like, for example, like our minds. I mean, like, there's part of us that is involved in survival, these genetic components that we're going to, have our mind think about and do what we feel we need to survive. And I don't understand that either, because, like, I mean, like, again, like, relative to the big picture, we're here 80, 100 years, and we're gone. And if we have kids, then the same for them. So, like, I'm not sure what this need for survival is, because I mean, like, and the other part is like, so like, if we die and we're just dead and that's it, then what's the point, 80, 100 years? And if we don't, then these 80, 100 years don't become very significant, because we've got the rest of eternity, or however long, a time, whatever, I don't know. I mean, the whole thing of like reality is like mind-boggling. I should like talk more about that, but nah. Um, all right, so 13, 17. Let's see. So yeah, so happiness. So like sometimes, like sometimes, I mean, it's ironic. Sometimes it's like, for example, like if I was like hanging out with my two co-hosts and a guest we had on the show last night after the show, and we were walking, across town, and we were talking, and I was just like, you know, I was feeling a kind of happiness just because I like these guys, and we're kind of like involved in a common mission, and it's kind of like pleasant. And so like, sometimes when I work on my happiness, um, and it's kind of like a direct working on it, I I maybe miss that kind of connection to others, um, and because like it's like it apparently isn't just about happiness. I think we connect happiness with meaning. In other words, like to have a more complete happiness, then we have to attach some meaning to our happiness. If it's just happiness, to be happy, it's not that it should have less meaning, but at least for me and probably for many of us, it probably would. So in other words, happiness connected to other people or to a, to the goal of making other people happy or the world happy or something, just like is a more complete, fulfilling happiness. But I want to address that. I want to challenge that because I think the reason, like with the other people component, why it feels sometimes more fulfilling to have the happiness derived from and be about other people is that well, I think the simple answer is conditioning. That's how we're taught to. Well, no, it's not even about teaching. That's how we experience life. In other words, like at our earliest happiness is we are taught it. I mean, like we're infants, and even though we smile sometimes while we're in the uterus, usually during REM sleep. Um, then we don't share these smiles. I don't know whether it's 6 weeks or something, but like I think parents are usually pretty pleased when the infant all of a sudden begins to respond to their smile with a smile of its own. So like, and then from that point on, I think parents attempt to do what is going to generate the greatest amount of happiness for the child, I think. And a lot of this is interactional. A lot of this is like actually mimicking. The child sees the parents' expressions and mimics them and tries to understand them and tries to share them. So like, I think it's kind of like, very biological. It's not like a part of modern civilization, I don't think, that that we that we grow up with this people, based happiness. And again, even though most of us aren't nearly as happy as we could and should be, the average level of happiness in the world is only 65%, and here in the United States, only 70. We do, other people tend to be our primary source of happiness, being with others, thinking about others. But all right, so like what I'm leading to is that I think we're evolving as a species, and like this evolution, has something to do with, it has actually a lot to do with this concept of free will. In other words, like, I don't know if like thousands of years ago, early humans believed in free will. I don't think they did. I mean, or I don't think the question arose to them. It didn't even arise to the Greeks, who had no term, no word for free will, but they had terms and words for fate, for destiny. Their whole mythology was based on these fates, these three fates or whatever, and like the gods who would pretty much decide what happens. And then like, there was this idea in certain Greek stories that you try to evade fate. Like there's this guy who, some soothsayer or oracle tells him like, well, fate's after you, and you're gonna die a certain day or something like that. And so like the guy says, well, I'm gonna outsmart fate. Fate thinks I'm gonna be in a certain city at a certain time, so I'm gonna travel to another city, and be there. But like fate turns out to be there, or whatever. So like but I think it was probably just not thought about more so than I don't know. I really don't know. But like, actually, yeah. I mean, like, to the extent that there's this modern disconnect, it actually may have a lot to do with this belief in free will. That it just like, first of all, in terms of like basic theology, the belief is both blasphemous and idolatrous. Let me explain it. And I don't know why I'm getting into this, but it's important. It's relative to happiness, all right? Basically, blasphemy is kind of like attributing to oneself qualities that are reserved for God. So like if God is all-powerful, sovereign, your believing that you have any power that's independent of or can supersede or override whatever God's power, that's blasphemy and idolatry. If we believe we have a free will, that we're kind of like considering ourselves mini gods, that yes, what we do is up to us. We have the power to decide independently of God, independently of the laws of nature. And that's like this kind of like supernatural power that is idolatrous. Um, but all right. But in terms of happiness, so like, what I'm trying to do is like connect this free will belief separates us from this source of everything, from the source of our behavior. In other words, like if we're attributing free will to ourselves and to others around us, we are going to be idolizing others, and we're going to be like seeing ourselves and others as the principal fundamental agent of human behavior. And apart from it being completely wrong, just completely mistaken, I think it separates us from who we really are. Because you have to think this through. Who we really are isn't this person in this body, with this mind, this brain. And the reason I say that's not who we really are is because everything we do, is caused by this chain of cause and effect that spans back before we're born, goes back to the Big Bang, or everything we do is like, nothing we do is up to us. Yeah, and causality is the best way. I know it's like abstract for a lot of you people, but it really is simple. In other words, like if everything we do has a cause, and then there's a cause, if everything we do has a cause, then there has to be a cause to the cause of everything we do, because everything has to have a cause, and causes always, occur before what they cause. Okay, so then you have like, you do something, there's a cause to that, then there's a cause to that cause, and then there's a cause to that cause, and these causes are always going back in time. So again, it's pretty clear that this chain of cause and effect that again applies to everything is what governs us, is what determines everything, like every thought you're thinking right now, every feeling, everything I'm saying, every word I'm saying, it's the result of this causal progression. Now, it gets a little, now I don't want to go into this, I'm sorry. Let me just try to summarize it. In terms of happiness, I think to the extent that we understand that we don't have a free will, instead of needing to connect our happiness to other people or to ourselves, which may actually be somewhat divisive, because like when we rely on others for our happiness, there would be disappointment even when we rely on, well, I think even if we rely on fate, there's going to be disappointment to a certain extent, but just the idea of focusing our attention on what we believe to be, the cause of our behavior, who we really think we are when we're not that person, when who we really are is like, this being or intelligence or consciousness that's created the conditions that lead to whatever we do. To the extent we can overcome that and understand that nothing we do is really up to us, then our happiness can be relational to that. That's, I don't know why it took so long to say that, but in other words, like a lot of our happiness is relational to other people, and it's not that it's wrong per se, but I think like to the extent that we attribute free will, autonomous agency to ourselves and others, that's where it creates the problem. So if we want a relationship with a good way of explaining it, like if there's a puppet, if there's a puppet in front of us, or a marionette with strings, right? And like, and we want to interact with it, we want to talk with it, and have a conversation with it. You know, we might play fantasy, you know, it might be pretend that we're actually talking to the puppet, you know. It's kind of like a fantasy we create, but that's an illusion, you know, to the extent we believed that, you know, in order to communicate with the puppet, we'd be talking to the puppet and the puppet would be talking to us, whatever. You understand the illusory nature of that kind of interaction. So like in that situation, what we would be doing out of wisdom and logic would be talking to whoever's like controlling the strings, right? And so that's the point. So in other words, like with happiness, I think maybe we can cultivate a happiness that is relational more to the source of who we are rather than the puppet manifestations of who we are. And so what is the purpose of that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure, because like, you know, we're still like, you know, the cool thing about happiness is like, all right, we recognize, it just like invites a lot of questions. We recognize that that's all there is. And actually, you know, like it's 26 minutes and I've got stuff to do. I've got dishes to do. You know, I've got stuff to do. So I'm going to like end this at 30 minutes and just upload it. But like to the extent we relate our happiness to this fundamental being, to who we really are, then we might be able to understand better what happiness is and perhaps focus on it better. Again, I know I haven't really like, you know, presented so much of a clear and complete understanding that. I think I'm kind of like, you know, maybe at other times I've understood it a bit better, but right now, you know, it's not completely clear to me how that, you know, what the benefits of that would be. You know, aside from, again, like talking to the puppeteer rather than to the puppet, but, you know, relative to happiness. Okay, so yeah, so yeah, I just feel like, you know, half an hour is good enough for today. And I'm glad, you know, I'm thankful that the universe is keeping me connected to this theme of happiness, because like, you know, all right, you know, not through my doing, I tend to be connected with things that are like really fundamental and important. You know, the universe tends to have me do this work that isn't trivial. You know, work on happiness, work on climate change, work on, you know, who we are as human beings, on global poverty and things like that. And, you know, I haven't been nearly as successful as I would like to be in a lot of ways, but that's what the universe seems to kind of like pull me toward. And so like, so then when I ask myself, well, why does the universe like now have me focus on happiness so much, to the extent that I'm, you know, creating and posting half an hour plus videos on this daily? And my guess is that, you know, our world may actually be entering a very, very challenging phase. Climate change, the geopolitical conflict that that might bring about, just these challenges are, I mean, there could be like, you know, it could be a challenge that'll lead to a much better future for everyone. You know, I tend to like to be an optimist, but it does seem like it'll be a challenging time. So that I think that to the extent that our world begins to think about and understand happiness much better, than as we move through these decades, as we move through this, you know, greatest challenge in the history of civilization, you know, the climate change thing, then we can like, we don't have to feel like we're losing things or sacrificing things. Actually, this might be a way to actually get us in touch with what's most important in life, you know, this idea of happiness, which might actually lead to far more happiness for all of us than before this climate crisis and, you know, whatever it leads to. All right, so we got about like 8 seconds left because I just want to keep this to 30 minutes because I got some other stuff I need to do. So I'll be back, hopefully tomorrow.